The Last of Us Part 3, without a doubt. A game that needs to be made, and in this video we're going to be going over some of the details. News, rumors, things that Neil Druckman has said, things that some of these actors have said, and maybe a couple other things. So go ahead and sit back and relax. As on December 15, 2022, Twitter user @ViewerAnon claims that developer NaughtyDog is already working on The Last of Us Part 3, a rumor we're inclined to pay attention to, given their track record regarding other NaughtyDog projects. They previously revealed the existence of Crash Bandicoot 4, ahead of an official announcement, as well as Ashley Johnson's casting in HBO's The Last of Us show, which lands on our screens this coming January. So this was quite a while ago, and viewer Anon actually says this specifically in his tweet. Well, I'm not watching anything, so Dr. Uckman next game is Last of Us Part 3, which is currently in production at NaughtyDog. But I've made another video about The Last of Us Part 3 which got over nearly 200,000 views, which I'm so grateful for every one of you for. Thank you so much for that. But where we talked about, like, Neil Druckman was saying, look, there is no Last of Us Part 3 in development, and from what we're also going to be learning today and reading today, it kind of makes sense that maybe yes, Last of Us Part 3 definitely isn't in production in a big way anyway. Neil Druckman did say that he had an outline for the story, but that was nothing real big, and we also talked about how they were in the whiteboarding stage of Last of Us Part 3, and that was actually getting a lot of traction during like December 28th, so slightly after this was this tweet was being published. But Neil Druckman himself, in the New Year's Day tweet that he put out, actually shut that down and kind of said, look, we're not really working on anything right now in terms of The Last of Us, and if we have a story, that is when we want to execute this game. And it also looks like they've got another new IP coming as well, something that we've never seen before, which I'm also going to be making a separate video on, so go ahead and subscribe for that. Now, the actor who played Tommy in The Last of Us, who also appeared in the HBO show, and The Last of Us Part 2, and also made an appearance of Kathleen's guard or something in the HBO show, has discussed what the character's future might look like if Part 3 was ever made. In an interview with Total Film, Jeffrey Pierce, who played Tommy in the games and Perry in the TV show, talked about the future of his in-game character and where he'd like to see Tommy go if Naughty Dog were to develop a third installment of the Last of Us game series. I think one of my favorite things about Neil and the culture at Naughty Dog, Pierce explains, is that they've said very clearly, if we can't find the compelling stories to tell within the world, we don't care how much money it would make, we're not going to do it. Which in this sort of day and age is just about unheard of. There's a potential for what Tommy would try to do, Pierce continues, but he's also pretty severely handicapped by the time the second game is over, in a very realistic fashion, so his ability to exert force in any way is certainly compromised. Those who have played The Last of Us Part 2 will remember that Tommy received some nasty injuries during the events of the sequel, ones that affect him months after he receives them. I'd be really interested to see how Neil, if he wants to tell that story, how he handles it and how he develops it and what it grows into. Pierce also tells Total Film, I think if they do something, it'll be great, but if they don't, then I think it's put to bed as still as one of the most powerful games that's ever been done. Now, that is a very big statement, as yes, Neil Druckman has said himself that if we don't find a compelling story, if there's not a story that he finds exciting to tell, there's a story that he wants to tell, something that could really push it forward, he won't make a game just because of the money. Now we see how The Last of Us Part 2 was structured and paced, and the story of that and you know, it was critically, or should I say the audience, a lot of the audience were disappointed with how the story turned out, but that was because that was like a story that we would never have expected, especially after Part 1. We would have never predicted like those are the events that are going to be taking place in Part 2. It was so different, dare I say bold, even though personally I did not enjoy that story at all compared to Part 1. Part 1 was just a masterpiece, and I love the gameplay, the graphics. It's still one of my top 20 best games of all time, but the story was just such a severe letdown to me. But there were things that I really did I really did respect and appreciate about that game. But we could be seeing this kind of thing with The Last of Us Part 3, where it's not really going to be something that is predictable. It's going to be something that is completely out there as well in terms of storytelling, and I hope that this time it will be for the better rather than how Part 2's story was, for me anyway. Also, Tommy's story really feels like it's not over. You know, the end of Part 2, I don't like how they left Tommy's character. It really did feel like we're leaving his character like this because it's gonna make sense for a third game. If they just like ended the story with that, it wouldn't be great for me. I don't think it would be great for anyone. I think that would actually kind of ruin Tommy's character in a way. But I always just thought the way Part 2 ended, there's definitely going to be a third game. This definitely belongs in the trilogy. However, the way Part 1 ended, it felt like, yes, that could be a one and done, and it was a great ending. How they left it open-ended, it felt like, yes, that could really be a conclusion to this franchise, even though it was just one game. But the way Part 2 ended, it does not seem like it could be a conclusion to this franchise, and I think that they really do need to make a third game, and it would be such a disappointment if they didn't. So the next story is from GamesRadar.com. The third installment is rumored to be in progress with PlayStation 6 in mind. Yet another rumor that The Last of Us Part 3 is in the works has surfaced, but Naughty Dog remains tight-lipped on whether we'll see another entry in this groundbreaking post-apocalyptic series. The latest rumor shared on Twitter by Dom the Bomb comes courtesy of the leak. According to the site, in an anonymous source at Sony, claims that The Last of Us Part 3 is currently in progress at Naughty Dog. So that kind of links in with the first story that we talked about on December 15, 2022, where they did say that Last of Us Part 3 is in production at Naughty Dog. Now we have this leak that's saying The Last of Us Part 3 is in progress at Naughty Dog, so hopefully this is true. I really hope that it is. Interestingly, the game is reported to be in development for PlayStation 5 with PlayStation 6 in mind. This information comes from the same source that claims the PlayStation 5 Slim is on the way later this year. Now let's read Dom the Bomb's tweet. The Last of Us Part 3 currently is in production. Will release on PS5 with PS6 in mind. Described as in progress. 2026 release is plausible. Budget depends on success of show? What? So the fact that it's saying budget depends on success of the show, which has been extremely successful, so there's nothing really to worry about. I'm thinking that even if the show wasn't successful, then it would get probably the same budget as The Last of Us Part 2. However, I'm thinking now that this is going to have a much bigger budget, as now when they develop Part 3, maybe they're going to start keeping in mind that, okay, remember that we've got to adapt this into the fourth season of the show, which we'll talk about a bit later, because it seems like Last of Us Part 2 will be split into 2 seasons. But so this will be, I would think that the reason why they've got the budget depends on the success of the show is because they really want to make this big, and also that this now affects the TV show, so they really got to make this something great and probably not as divisive as The Last of Us Part 2 story, which I'm very excited for. I think that's very good news, but we've got to wait for more information about this. But that is a very, very intriguing line that Dom the Bomb has put out there, if that is true, according to the leak, of course, and I hope that leak is right, because that means The Last of Us Part 3 is in production and we're 3 years away from this possible release date. Again, from Games Radar, The Last of Us Part 2's director has said it's up to Naughty Dog if there's another game in the series or not. I know there's a bunch of people wondering about The Last of Us Part 3 and whether that will be a thing or not. Naughty Dog co-president Neil Druckman told BuzzFeed in a new interview, before adding that the studio is very privileged to have Sony as its publisher. Druckman says that this means Naughty Dog is entirely free of any pressure to make a sequel, that they don't want to. There won't be another Uncharted game, Druckman says. because of this strong relationship with Sony and the absence of any pressure from the publisher. With The Last of Us, it's up to us whether or not we want to continue or not. Druckman said, "Our process is the same thing we did when we did part 2, which is if we can come up with a compelling story that has this universal message and statement about love, just like the first and second game did, then we will tell that story. If we can't come up with something, we have a very strong ending with part 2, and that will be the end." So again, we have kind of touched on this earlier, so I don't want to retread those steps, but yes, I hope they do find this third game with a great story. And as we've just talked about with the thing about Dom the Bomb's leak, hopefully this is true and it is in production now, and he can't really say, and they have kind of found that story. I mean, he has written an outline for this game already, so it seems like he's got a story. He's got somewhat of a story. He's got like the main base, the core, the foundation of the story, and what the universal message and the statement about love is within this story. It could be something where it's like Ellie and Tommy, and it's about, I think that's a very different message, where Tommy is just so bent on destruction, and Ellie, who is also bent on destruction in the last game, has really found forgiveness in her heart, and she's found a way to let it go and move on, but Tommy can't do that. And this is a story about Ellie and Tommy. I feel like something along those lines will be absolutely incredible, because I really want for this game Tommy to have a big role in The Last of Us Part 3. I think his character is amazing, and the way they left him, it seems like he's got a lot of more story to tell, and I really want him to play a big role in The Last of Us Part 3. Also from Games Radar, in an interview with Hollywood Reporter, Druckman got onto the topic of a potential sequel to 2020's Game of the Year, The Last of Us 2, and while he unsurprisingly didn't reveal anything new, he definitely left the door wide open. With regards to a potential The Last of Us 3, Druckman simply said, "I think there's more story to tell." Also, speaking to BuzzFeed, Naughty Dog co-president Neil Druckman said he considers the multiplayer game to be another chapter in the universe of The Last of Us. So, in regards to The Last of Us Faction, which is the multiplayer game, this will be another chapter. We know that this is going to help expand the world of The Last of Us and give us new stories, and I really hope, I really hope that not only Naughty Dog, but they can kind of give it to other developers and other developers within Sony Studios, to give them a crack at this Last of Us universe, and let us have different stories within the Last of Us universe, spin-offs within the Last of Us universe, and let other people tell their stories within this, and really have some great new characters, some amazing new characters, and just have loads of different stories. Because one of the best things about this universe is that there's so much more to discover, and there could be so many different types of infected. You know how we've got bloaters, and in this game we had the Rat King, and we've got clickers, and we've got runners, and I think there's actually more out there in different parts of the world. The way the temperature, the climate is in different parts of the world, that could affect how we get different mutations of clickers and just these infected that are just creepy and disgusting. And also in Last of Us Part 3, how we could find out these new types of infected as well, and maybe even our characters didn't even know about. And I think this universe has a lot of potential to expand, not only in factions but in spin-offs too. Another story from Games Radar, Troy Baker, who played Joel in Last of Us and Last of Us Part 2, has said they'd be eager to return for Part 3 if it were to happen. In an interview with comicbook.com, Baker spoke about the possibility of there being a third Last of Us game, revealing that they don't know whether another game is even on the cards at this point. People always ask, is there going to be a Last of Us Part 3? Baker explains, I have no idea. No idea. I didn't know there was going to be a Part 2. But if Neil Druckman has a story that he wants to tell and he wants me to be a part of it in any way, Baker continues, I am there 7 days a week and twice on Sunday. I absolutely would follow him. So at least we know Joel would be on board for Part 3 if it were to happen. Those who've played Last of Us Part 2 will immediately see how Baker's return to the series may cause a bit of a problem though. So, of course, spoiler, if you haven't played the Last of Us game, Joel is no longer a main central point, and so Part 2 is kind of the end of Joel's story. Unfortunately, I love Joel. But I think Tommy could now take up that kind of role and mantle of Joel, where we have that kind of father figure, but this time this is a father figure really bent on revenge and kind of just seeing red, and really wants to kill Abby and the Fireflies or whoever gets in his way. This could become, in fact, a very crazed version of Tommy, and also have a story where he doesn't really get a redemption and he just goes overboard and can tell a story of how even though you love someone, and you try to help them and stuff, and Ellie really will be trying to help Tommy in the next game, how it just doesn't work. And this is like when you've got someone so bent on destruction, and Tommy was kind of a calm guy. Tommy wasn't the guy who really had all this rage in his heart, and it was kind of Joel that did things and forced Tommy to do things that he wasn't proud of. What it seems to me is that Tommy's going to become far worse than Joel ever was, or become that peak version of Joel that we never got to see because we were 20 years in the future by the time part 1 came around. But you know, during that timeline where it was Tommy and Joel, and Joel forced Tommy to do things that he wasn't proud of, we may see that version of Tommy come out and really be like this kind of crazed lunatic version of Tommy in the next game. And I really hope that we do get to see something along those lines for The Last of Us Part 3. Again, I really want Tommy to have a big role, but Troy Baker, I guess he can come back in flashbacks, I guess he can come back as a memory, and I would really kind of hope to see Joel again in flashbacks and kind of his voice in some new scenes and just like things that Ellie remembers. But it's not kind of like the main focus point, but it's something nice to see and pay homage to Joel, especially if what it seemingly is going to be a trilogy of games, so part 1, part 2, part 3, where part 3 is the last one. I would like to see Joel one more time, of course, even though he is dead in the story. Not only Joel wants to come back, but Laura Bailey as Abby. In an interview with Comic Book Movie, Bailey reveals she's keen to play Abby again in The Last of Us Part 3 if given the opportunity. I would definitely go back to her, the actress said. I know there was a lot of drama in response to her character, but it was one of the most influential roles I've had in my life. I would 100% go back to play more Abby if the opportunity came up. Now, I do want Abby in the next game, of course. I think she's got a vital role. I don't think they have to make her a big part. I don't think we have to play as Abby as much as we did in the second game. I really want this to be more of an Ellie and Tommy story for me, obviously right now. But I do want to see Abby, and I think there is a lot of story to be told with Abby. I think she's a very important part, and I wouldn't want them to cut her out at all. The way her character ended in part 2, I felt like she got the kind of better ending and the more interesting ending in a way, because now she's found the Fireflies, and that's gotta come back, and we've got to rebuild this Fireflies, but not as they were, but what they should have been all along. And I think that's what Abby is going to do. Now, switching lanes momentarily, I did want to talk about this in this video because this project was actually inspired by the Last of Us HBO show, and that is I Am Legend 2. I Am Legend 2 is in the works. As Deadline reports, the original movie star Will Smith will return as the leading main role in the sequel alongside Michael B. Jordan, whose role is unclear. Now wait, didn't Smith's character die in the first movie? Unequivocally yes. Robert Neville died when he exploded himself with a grenade because he was being surrounded by a horde of vicious homicides. Well, according to Deadline, I Am Legend 2 is making the first movie's alternate ending in which Robert doesn't die canon, and using it as a launching point to tell its story. Now that is so weird. That is so weird, and so lucky that they even made an alternate ending back then. I would, as a kid, I loved I Am Legend, and I still love I Am Legend. I think it's one of the great zombie movies that I've ever watched, and I really loved it. And I know they had that Batman vs Superman tease in that movie as well, and this is going to be written by Akiva Goldsman, who wrote the first I Am Legend, suggesting that using the alternate ending as a starting point for the sequel will allow it to be more faithful adaptation of the original novel by Richard Matheson. Furthermore, The Last of Us, which has been adapted to TV by HBO and is midway through its highly successful first season, serves as a major inspiration for I Am Legend 2. So thanks to thanks to the HBO's Last of Us, we are going to be getting I Am Legend 2. So I kind of wanted to talk about that right here. So if the rumors are true that The Last of Us Part 3 is going to be released in 2026, which I kind of doubt, I think it will be 2027, 2028. While Mason said he will always insist on never boring people, never putting out filler episodes, he thinks the story of The Last of Us Part 2 can't just be told in one season, implying that if all goes well, season 3 may come eventually. We really want the freedom to do it right. The only thing I insist on is never boring people and never putting out filler episodes. They've got to stand on their own and be compelling, always. But I think that as we continue, the rest of it can't just be told in one season. So it seems that The Last of Us Part 2, what he's trying to say is we're going to make it into 2 seasons because The Last of Us Part 3 is going to take too long to develop. I feel like that's what he's really trying to say without making it sound so blatant and blunt. So with The Last of Us Season 2 already greenlit, that's already the 3rd season's plans to make it a part 2 of The Last of Us Part 2, which means they're going to split the game of The Last of Us Part 2 into 2 seasons. And when The Last of Us Part 3 comes out, we can expect, depending on the story, which I think it will be, split also into 2 seasons and really flesh it out and really give it all the time it needs to be as great as it possibly can. But that is everything so far on The Last of Us Part 3, including some TV news, including some inspiration in regards to I Am Legend coming because of The Last of Us HBO show, but also some thoughts from the actors themselves and the fact that they don't really know what's going on, it seems, in terms of The Last of Us Part 3. But Neil Druckman having the outline for the game already planned, and also with the leak saying that yes, 2 leaks in fact saying that yes, it's in production, with 2 leaks in fact saying that it is in production, and with one saying also it's gonna have PS6 in mind, which is kind of obvious. It's not really a big news. Oh my god, they've got PS6 in mind. No, it's kind of obvious. I mean, we haven't even scratched the surface of the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X's power yet, so we don't really need to be thinking about PS6. But they're trying to think, I think, within that time frame, in regards to how long it's going to take. We're already on the 3rd year of PlayStation 5 now, regarding of how long it's going to take to create Last of Us Part 3. Sony may even have the PlayStation 6 near enough ready for launch, but I really think it's time that we start getting these true PS5 games, and I hope Naughty Dog's next game is going to really take the power of the PlayStation 5 and really showcase it. And I really also hope that The Last of Us Part 3 is going to be an open world game. Guys, thanks so much for watching. Peace out, God bless, and I hope to see you in one of my next videos. Take care, guys.
Sittin